Greatest common factor. You have your excuse me. You have your calculator, which does GCD for you. Greatest common divisor. If you want to, the only problem with that is you can't use it for your decimals. Greatest common divisor doesn't work for decimals. So we will do, in case you're home and don't have this calculator, we'll just do it the long way. And then I'll show you the shortcut on the calculator. Yes, good. Glad to hear it. It took me a long time to fix that yesterday. So 6 factors of 6, 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and there's 2 x's, x and x. Factors of 10, 2 and 5. Whoops, I skipped 1 and 10. Always try to do that. 1 and 10, 2 and 5. 3 doesn't work and 4 doesn't work. And then this one has 1x. So greatest common factor is 2. The highest number they have in common is 2. And then they also have 1x in common. And it's always the smallest exponent, 1x. So the smallest exponent here is 1. So this is 2, that's 1. So that's your greatest common factor. And this didn't ask to factor it. That's what we're going to practice again today. So if you went ahead and factored it, that's great. But if you didn't, then that's all it asked. It didn't say to factor using that. All right, and then in a calculator, or if you are at home, you can even look up like find the greatest common divisor, like websites, and I'll just put it for you. But here, menu, number, greatest common divisor. Menu, number, greatest common divisor. And this is 6 and 10. So 6, 10. It's 2. Another way to do it is that. All right, now we have to find the greatest common divisor of 3 different terms. So we have to do this, break all these down 3 different times. Or if you're going to put it in the calculator, you're going to put 5, 10, 25. So 5 is 1 and 5, and then we have 2 x's. 10 is 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and this has 1x. And 25 is 1 and 25, 5 and 5. So our greatest common divisor, our biggest number that we see that goes into all of these numbers, 5, 10, and 25. Still writing, I'm gonna slow down. So it's the biggest number that goes into all of them, 5. So when you're doing it for 3 numbers, the number has to go into all 3 of them. So your greatest common factor is 5. And then looking at variables, this one has just an x. I mean, this one has 2 x's, this one has 1x, but this one, 25, doesn't have any x's. So they have no x's in common. So your greatest common factor is just 5. That's it. That's just reminding you how to find greatest common factor, and then we're going to use that later. Yes. Okay. So our notes today, we're going to do mixed factoring. So that's what you should write, mixed factoring. And the first thing you have to do is check for a greatest common factor. If there is one, we have to factor that out. And then after that, we still have to keep going. Like that was one whole day we spent on greatest common factor. We did that. Now we're gonna keep going to our other days. We started with factoring with our second day was difference of squares. I change this letter to a C. And that's when there was no middle number, so B would equal 0. Then we had our basic trinomial, where A equaled 1. And then our trinomial where A is greater than 1. And then we have not done 4 terms. That's next week. We're not doing that yet. I'm gonna get rid of that. So those are the 3 different factoring we've worked on, where B equals 0, where A equals 1, and then when A is greater than 1. So I'm going to start breaking down 28 and 63 while you write all that down. Because I don't know all my factors are 28. So 128, 2. Oh, let's go move in a second. I just need 2, 8 divided by 2, 14. 28 divided by 3 is a decimal. You can skip it. 28 divided by 4 is 7. 28 divided by 5, decimal. 28 divided by 6, decimal. And then 7 is my next number. You have A squared, so that's 2 A's and 1 B. And then do the same thing with 63. 1 and 63. It's odd, so 2 doesn't go into it, but 3 does. 21. If 2 doesn't go into it, 4 doesn't go into it. 5 doesn't go into it because it doesn't end in a 5 or a 0. You get a decimal. 6 doesn't go into it because 2 doesn't go into it. 7 and 9. And then we'll do 8. What's nice to realize is if 2 doesn't go into it, that means 4 doesn't go into it, 6 doesn't go into it, 8 doesn't go into it. So you can skip those numbers. So that if a 2 doesn't go into 63, if it's an odd number, then none of your even numbers will be an easy divisor. And then this one just has a B. So what is our biggest number that goes into both of them? Greatest common divisor. 7. So 7 goes into both of them. And then your variables, what do they have in common? 1B. So 7B is your greatest common factor. So 7B. Just write it again because I have everything under there, so I can't write it there. So we have to factor the greatest common factor out. Or in other words, a factor, you can think of divide. I can put that there. Divide the greatest common factor out. So I'm going to divide every term by 7b. Adrian, working on some notes. So 28 divided by 7, 4. And then a squared, there's nothing, so we just bring it down. And then the b and the b cancel. B and the b cancel. Just like this way. And then I have minus 63 divided by 7 is 9. And the b and the b cancel. Okay, we're still not done with this question because there's more. This is factoring out the greatest common factor, but now this is difference of squares, a squared and c squared. And how I know that is that these are perfect squares. Do you guys know your perfect squares? If you don't know your perfect squares, you need to make that list. So we'll make it down here. Perfect. Then we'll make it up here. Trying to get rid of that line so I can write my perfect squares. Perfect squares. I just spelled squares wrong. Goodness. Perfect squares are 1, 4. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 times 9 is 81. 10 times 10 is 100. 11 times 11 is 121. And that list can go on forever because you just keep doing like 12 times 12, 13 times 13. But so if you're looking to see if it's a difference of squares question, you need to see if your two numbers are in this list. So ours are. It's a 4 and a 9. So ours is a difference of squares question. So draw our box. And our X thing. Remember, you have to multiply A and C and figure out what multiplies to that number and adds to your B. So here, A is 4, B is not written because remember, B is always the one with the X squared. I'm sorry, B is always the number with X. So there is no number with just A. So it'd be 0. Difference of squares, your B is always 0. Yeah. So remember, this is the very first day of factoring we started with. No, it's the second day because we did greatest common factor first. So this is the one we have to add to 0 and multiply to 4 times negative 9. Negative 4 times negative 9 is negative 36. Yeah. Okay. So what two numbers multiply to 36 and add to 0? And if you don't know, you do your factor chart. I'm going to scoot this over a little bit. 36. 1 and 36. It's even, so 2 goes into it. 18. 3 goes into it. 12. 4 goes into it. 9, because that's how we got 36 to begin with. 5, it doesn't end in a 5 or a 0, so it's not 5. 6 goes into it because 2 and 3 goes into it. And the next number I'd use would be 7, but it's after 6, so we know our list is done. So which of these have a difference of 0? 6 and 6. One of them has to be negative. Doesn't matter which one, but one of them has to be negative. Okay. Ax squared goes in this top box. C goes in this bottom one. The 2 numbers you chose with a variable goes in the other ones. And it doesn't matter which one you make negative. I'll try to start putting the smallest one up here every time. That way we can be a little consistent, but it doesn't matter. All right. What's our biggest number that goes into both 4 and 6? 2. And how many variables do they have in common? 1. 1. Because this one has 1 and this one has 2. So they have 1 in common. Ah, yeah. And then what about 4 and 6? What's the greatest common factor? 2. And then how many variables do they have in common? 1. Yeah. So 2a times 2a gives me 4a squared. 2a times what gives me negative 6a? Or if you don't like multiplying, you can think of it as division. So it's negative 6 divided by 2. Negative 3. So negative 3 times 2a is negative 6a. So 2a times what gives you 6a? Again, 3. And if you don't like multiplication, you can do division. 6 divided by 2 is 3. All right. The last difference to this, I know this is a very long question. Today's questions are very long. Is 2a. Make sure you put a plus 3 and a 2a minus 3. But we're not done. Just because we took this out at the very beginning. We divided that out at the very beginning. So we have to bring it back in our answer. So it just goes in front. So since you factor out 7b at the very beginning, you have to bring it back at the very end. So just to review, that's it. That's the answer to that one. That's it, as if it wasn't a lot of work. That's a lot of work. You divide out your greatest common factor. So first we had to find our greatest common factor, 7b. We divided it out. And then we realized this was the difference of squares because it was a 4 and a 9 was in our perfect square list. So we then had to do our x and factor it all out. Okay. Let's do 2 more. Because I try to only go to 11. Let's do this one. And then I can help you individually with some of these if we get stuck. All right, so we have to first start with our greatest common factor of all 3 terms. 3, 9, and 30. What is your greatest common factor of 3, 9, and 30? How do you know that so quickly? Yes. So 3, I think what you said, 3 is only 1 and 3. So if 3 can go into the other 2, then you know that's your greatest common factor. Because if we can help not having to write that whole list out, they'll definitely save us a lot of time. So 3 is our greatest common factor. So we have to factor that out of each one of these. So then we get m squared plus 3m minus 10. Okay, so A would be, B would be, and C would be. And I write this every time. I know how to do it, but I still write it every time just to remember. So A, what's A? 1. It's always the number in front. So A is 1. B, 3, and C is 10. And that's following the ax squared plus bx plus c. So A is always the number in front of x squared, or in this case, n squared. B is always the number in front of just the x, or m. And C is just the number. And be careful to keep your signs with it. If I didn't make this a negative 10, my whole answer is going to be wrong. Just because I forgot one sign. So A times C, 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. And B is 3. So I want you to think of 2 numbers that multiply to negative 10 and add to 3. 5 and 2, nice. I realized I can open up what we did. Ah, no, come back. Where'd it go? Oh, what we did last class. Is that not one class? I wanted the little box we made last class. No. 2, 3. I should have this one. No. All right, I give up. Sorry. So you said 2 and 5. And which one has to be negative? 2. 2. So remember, there's 4 options with these boxes. Or x's, sorry, not boxes. If it adds to a positive, multiplies to a positive, and adds to a positive, your 2 numbers have to be positive. If it multiplies to a positive but adds to a negative, both numbers have to be negative. If it multiplies to a negative and adds to a negative, you want the bigger number to be negative. If it multiplies to a negative and adds to a positive, you want the bigger number to be positive. That means the smallest one would be negative. So those are our 4 options. If it adds to 0, then one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. So I guess there's technically a 5th option. But so our case right now is a negative to a positive. So a negative and a positive. So you want the bigger number to be positive. So the 5 is going to be positive, and the negative is going to be the smaller number. Okay. Ax squared goes in your top left box. 1m squared. C goes in your bottom box, 10. And then you put the 2 numbers you chose in your other boxes with a variable x or m in this case. I said I was going to put my smallest one up here. And then we factor like normal. Can you fill out your box? -2? Oh, -10. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Yay, you corrected me. I appreciate it. All right. So our greatest common factor between 1m squared and -2m. So our greatest common factor between 1 and -2, 1. And they have one variable in common. Our greatest common factor between 1m squared and 5m. Again, 1m. 1 times 1 is 1. M times m is m squared.
It's easier when it's ones, because then it's just 5.
Yes. Yeah, so 1m times 5 gives me 5m. And then 1m times -2 gives me -2m. And then 5 times -2 gave me -10. So you're right. If this is just all ones, it's a lot easier. So your answer after you factor is your outside. So these are my answers. But also now a 3 as well. But we'll get to that. So 1m and 5 is a positive side. So make sure you put plus. And 1m minus 2. And then we took out the greatest common factor at the very beginning, so you have to bring it back into your answer. Okay, it's 11 o'clock, so I'm going to stop my video notes here. And how about I help? We do 4 more, just like individually. Like I'll do 1 with you guys individually each, or 2 more since you guys are also online with me today. So let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, we're going to do Delta Math